Hello and welcome to Creative Vitality Jam Sessions. Here we have intimate conversations with extraordinary dance and theater artists about reimagining creativity and supporting and building our beautiful community. CVJS and I walk in solidarity and as allies for equality, justice, and respect, because Black Lives Matter. President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris preach unity and healing. So let's join in. I'm Helen Pickett, and today's guest is Margaret Tracey, director of the Boston Ballet School. Margaret and I have known each other since 1987. We met in New York. I think she's here. Hello, Margaret. Welcome.
Hello, Helen. How are you?
I'm actually doing quite well. It's a beautiful sunny day, and I got out for my morning walk, which makes all the difference.
Well, I have not ventured outside. We had, a nor'easter hit us last night. But it's mostly ice and the sun is shining and we'll get a little warm weather and I'll be on my afternoon walk. How's that?
Yeah, it's really saved me, these walks, because no gym, as we know, I haven't been in the studio since March. So, the nature and the fresh air and seeing, neighborhood life has really done a lot for me. So I'm really thankful for that I actually have a neighborhood that I can really walk in,
I said to my husband the other day, I live outside Boston. It's cold in the winter and the winters are long and I don't like winter. And yet I said to him the other day, I said, you know what? I'm looking forward to the season this year. Because I think we have all connected to nature in a very different way due to the pandemic. We stop and we look at sunsets more. I've watched the leaves change. And I enjoy the way the sky looks under a winter sun is very different than the way the sky looks in a summer sun. Wow. So I'm embracing the cold this year, yes. Like it or not.
I am too, and I'm a little bit, although you know me, I go to the romantic bent, as you just so beautifully illustrated. But here, this time I'm a little bit more stubborn because I'm like, I have my long underwear, I have my 2 ski jackets, and nothing's going to stop me from walking.
Good for you.
So this is the first question for everyone. What part of the world are you in?
As I mentioned, I am in Newton, Massachusetts, which is a western suburb of Boston. I've lived here for, 12 years now. So wow. Tuning in from the beautiful state of Massachusetts.
Yes, wonderful. So I want to dive right in, Margaret. I'd like to start with your directorship of the Boston Ballet School. So we'll kind of weave in and out of our chronological time order, but I want to start right here because it's important. And you have been director since 2007, and you've transformed it into one of the leading dance education institutions in North America. There has been a great need to be practical and a great opportunity to be positive, to shift and reimagine dance education during the pandemic. And I know you've done some of this, so I really want to hear about it. How has your leadership role during this time pivoted? So specifically your leadership role, and then of course want to hear what you're doing. And then how have you reimagined your dance education?
That's a great question, Helen. Pivot has become a word that none of us like. It's almost a 4-letter word these days, but I'll start with saying, I'm referring back to what you just said before, you're being stubborn. I had to let go a lot of my stubbornness when the pandemic hit. And the first way I had to do that is, for instance, here we are at the beginning of December. If you had asked me a year ago that we would have had to pivot to virtual learning for dance education, I would have said, no, we'll shut down. There's no way. Absolutely. You can't, I'm not going to teach in my my family room. I'm not going to ask kids to take ballet in their bedroom. I adamantly would have said there's no way it could happen. Well, March 12th came and Boston Ballet School had the very critical decision of having to shut down, thinking we might shut down for 2 to 4 weeks, right? As we all thought. And what was extraordinary was the way my team came together to reimagine what we would do. And I'll never forget, we made the decision on a Thursday, and then Friday we all met in one of our communal offices at 19 Clarendon. And some of my key team members came and said, okay, Margaret, we've got this idea. Here's what we can do. Here's how we can do it. And then the administrative team was able to administer a new sort of recorded portal for our students to continue to train with us for what we thought was only going to be a matter of weeks. So our teachers all figured out how to record themselves teaching class. Our administrative team, along with our IT folks, figured out how to create a portal for all the different levels of our school that they could log in and weekly take their classes with me and with Kathleen Mitchell and Peter Stark and Miranda Weiss and Igor Burlak. And it was just extraordinary how quickly and creatively my team embraced and sort of said, Margaret, we can do this. We can do this. And so, and I think we did it because if we had known how long we would have been in this virtual world, we might have been more discouraged. And my stubbornness probably would have shut me down. But the unknown of how long it was going to take allowed us to start our wheels turning, going, well, wait a minute, we could do this. This is possible. So that was phase one. And then when we realized the recorded content was extremely time consuming and the kids were missing the one-on-one connection, we thought, well, let's experiment with some Zoom classes. And so, by the summer, we were running a fully remote Zoom virtual summer dance program.
So basically what this, and I speak very often, and that's a really big foundation of these sessions, right? And I think you're the 52nd interview now, is I started it with the idea that, right, so we're here, and how are we going to be active? And you just spoke to that. It's like, it's not about shutting down. And you said something so right on the money. Sometimes it's so good we don't know the future. And I wouldn't say sometimes. I think that's kind of that's an unthoughtful phrase. I think it is always good we don't know the future, because that if we did, we wouldn't be present. And the presentness of this calamity, this thing that we've never, nobody that is alive today, except for the few amazing examples, like this woman who beat the 1918 flu. I just heard about her, and she's had COVID twice, and I think she's near 100, and or she's over 100. She's over 100. But most of us have never been in a situation like this. And to take that presence, which you just spoke about, and say, right, so we have to reinvent. I mean, I have a feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just had a long talk with a friend yesterday about how this could actually shift the whole idea. Actually, it was Miko. I was talking with Miko on the phone about this whole time, how we have the great chance to grow so immensely. And dancers are so good at it, because once you're a dancer, we're always a dancer, and we know how to problem solve, and we know how to problem solve in the moment, because that's live art. So,
well, yeah. And that led me to, I love how you summarized that beautifully, Helen, because when I talk about sort of the phase two of how that challenged me and my sort of core team to rethink what a dance education is all about. So of course, that's when the fun really, and I really say this, that's when the fun and the creativity just sort of blew me away this summer, because we all sat there and said, okay, we know now we're going to have a virtual summer. We know that our 4 to 6 hours of in the studio training nonstop is not possible when kids are at home. What is the appropriate amount of training we can do? We worked very closely with Heather Southwick, the director of our physical therapy, to thoughtfully and intentionally sort of design a conditioning into bar, into what was appropriate for center and what that could look like, how much point work, all of that. So all of a sudden we saw our physical activity shrink. But then I thought, wait a minute, here is our opportunity to train and educate artists. So let's start thinking about the courses that I've often in my heart wanted to provide, but never felt like I had enough hours in the day, because, we feel this pressure to keep these kids dancing all the time. So we added courses like music theory. We added an acting for dancers course. We added dance pedagogy. We had a whole series of we didn't call it dance history, we called it dance evolution, sort of the evolution of dance throughout the ages with great influential people who've impacted our industry, like, the Petite era to the Balanchine era, to all of that. I designed a lecture series in the evenings, interviewing different people. I did a business of the ballet. My wonderful partner, Dave Chesnick, did a whole thing on arts management with his team, which it was one of my favorite lectures I attended, because I think I have the most extraordinary administrative team in the world. We invited Teresa Ruth Howard to share, just to share who are you? What are you doing in the ballet world right now? Just on the heels of what happened with George Floyd. And we had a cultural responsiveness lecture series with one of my wonderful colleagues who does this as a consultant, work with the students. And then here's where it was so exciting. Out of that 5-week summer lecture series that she did, she ended up saying, Margaret, she came to me, she said, Margaret, your students are really interested in how to activate themselves as artists. How do they really use their art and their position to be an activist in our world right now? So I want to design a course, Artist as Activist, that we can run year round. So in the first quarter of our school year, our professional division students began an Artist as Activist course, and they will do part 2 in February. So again, all of this idea that this time gave me an opportunity and our team to say, we need to rethink how we're training our dancers, because there's something missing. There's something missing in what we've been giving them. We haven't been giving them enough to really encourage their artistic growth holistically. Because they're, like you said, they're going to be dancers whether they choose to go and become a doctor or they end up on the stage as a principal dancer one day. They're always going to be a creative artist. And that creativity is what we need in our culture right now.
That's right. Because I really do believe, I really, really believe, especially after the years I've lived, that artists, and I will say dancers, I'll repeat it, we really know how to, we're problem solvers on so many levels. And that's the thing I've always maintained. There's a wonderful book by Howard Gardner called Multiple Intelligences. And I really believe that ballet dancers, not just ballet dancers, pardon me, dancers know so many, or intrinsically, symbiotically know and understand so many of those intelligences. And I believe that is one of the reasons why a person who is trained as a dancer goes on and knows how to be successful in whatever, like you said, they choose to do. Yeah. I revere dancers so much. It's really, I really do. I'm in awe daily of what the dance world is doing. There was something that I was reminded of when you spoke about dance history. Mr. Ailey used to say he wanted, when he was alive, he thought the perfect or a beautiful dancer had a ballet dancer lower body and a modern dance upper body. And I love that. I love that image, and I love that he said that right there, he was thinking back then that dancer is a dancer is a dancer. We are not divided by our techniques, or we can have it all. And it just reminded me, when you were talking about education, it just came to my mind, because that's something I learned also while teaching at Ailey.
That's a beautiful image. I will keep that in my consciousness.
Yeah. So concerning the performative aspect of education, and you've alluded to this, like the program you've just spoken about, wow. I mean, that is artist building. So congratulations, beautiful. So concerning the performative aspect of education, so without a stage, now you've gone into this, so maybe, but I'm sure there's more to say. Without a stage, how has the digital world figured into performance? So I guess we didn't tackle that side. Has it enhanced any aspects, brought new ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. That was another piece that, as you know, you've been a guest in our summer dance program. And one of the things we like to do is an end of program workshop to showcase what these kids are. It's always extraordinary to me what these kids are able to learn and accomplish inside of 5 weeks. I mean, they're extraordinary. So I gave an assignment to 2 of my teachers, Miranda Weiss and Kathleen Mitchell, and I said, everybody is figuring out how to create art through Zoom. How are we going to do this summer? So they designed a collaborative choreography course for each of the 10 levels that we served over the summer. We had about 170 students that participated in this program, and they were divided into 10 levels. And the Miranda and Kathleen came up with this brilliant idea to have each of the groups create a piece of work that they would be in charge of designing themselves. And everyone had a different role. They could be a choreographer, they could be participants, they could be an editor, they could be a presenter. There had to be a concept that they came up with. They had to make sure that if there were music rights, that they understood what music they could and could not use. They had to create their own schedule. They had to figure out how to do this across multiple time zones. And it was fascinating to watch. And so the two teachers became the facilitator of this project. And so at the end of the summer program, all the families and the students tuned in, and we were able to share this recorded content of I think it was about a 5 to 8 minute piece that each of the levels put together. And again, what did we learn from it? We learned that this generation is really technologically savvy, much more than we are, at least than I am. Their editing blew me away. Again, it was brilliant. We also saw the hunger for these young people to express themselves, to have a voice. And I think that was, as I was sitting here spewing off all of the new aspects of our educational offerings that we designed over the summer, the overriding theme that this pause in our normal life has given me is my job in arts education to elevate and develop the artist's voice at a much younger age. And their voice, not their voice through their tendus, because they are already completely accomplished at doing that. But where is their voice as an activist, as someone who has concepts and ideas, as their choreographic voices? I mean, you and I are going to have a conversation later this week about how you're going to help me nurture these young choreographers, particularly young women. So again, that idea what does it mean for a dancer to have a voice?
Yeah. Yeah, because it is, I was talking again with someone yesterday, and I had a lot of conversations yesterday, about the fact that it is much harder for a director to have a league of curious, self-starting, intelligent artists in their ranks, as it's just much harder to lead those kinds of people, right? Because what do those kinds of people have? They have their own opinion. But it pays off. It pays off, especially, and it pays off immeasurably, and especially as we are evolving, because how many choreographers now come into the studio and say, this will be a collaborative community and a collaborative effort. How will you contribute to your voice in this piece? You know, and I came from that culture with Bill, of course. So there are those people that are out there, but it's far much more spread out and much more comprehensive. I'm hearing it over and over again. And so to have those dancers in the studio. So again, you know, the fact you just said it, you're cultivating these young minds to not separate their technique from their art, that their technique is their art. Their technique is their soul. Their technique is their story. Yeah.
But that's it. You know, I've had numerous conversations with Melanie Person, who runs Ailey, about the developing artistry. And we've been having this dialogue for a number of years. And this moment has really challenged me in my role to really dig deep to discover what does that mean. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Helen. It is much harder for directors to have a room full of people with opinions, and yet I don't think we can move this art form forward without dancers having a much more collaborative, supported, encouraged voice in the process of all aspects of how we function. Marketing, everything. Development, everything. I don't think this is limited to, I don't think the dancer's voice is limited to what's happening in the creative art making that goes on within the walls of the studio.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's my job and I did it this summer. I asked my students, what do you need? We need to start asking.
Yes.
And we need to separate ourselves from that sort of, we are the experts and we tell everybody what to do. If there's anything that I have discovered as being a teacher is the most humbling job I've ever had in my life. And it will continue to be. And it's humbling because guess what? I learn more than I ever give them. I know I'm learning more from them than they'll ever learn from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, beautiful. Yes, Margaret. So I have here to cap off this line of questions. Well, we spoke about that. I was going to say, what benefits does this current period bring? But I think we really covered that. Unless you have any other, I have a question actually. It might be, it is kind of to the side of it, but how are you dealing with Petite Allegro and Gran Allegro with this kind of, I'm mentoring a few on the side, and I'm really focusing on Petite Allegro and medium jumps and big jumps, because in their home spaces, how are you tackling this very important part of the technique?
I am gratefully at the moment only teaching students in person, but I spent months teaching them while they were at home. And I will say the Petite Allegro, one of the things that, again, I learned from collaborating with some of my healthcare specialists is that moving quickly is actually easier on the body than a slow jump, sort of. So again, so sort of, you know, the small Petite Allegro that keeps it light. I discovered the tempo of the Petite Allegro is really, really important when you're training at home, and it needs to be light and kept quickly, so they don't have too much time to leave the floor, quite frankly, because their floors are all, you know, some are hard, some are soft, you know, they don't have proper floors.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to create combinations that give you a sense of expansion and movement within a sort of 6x6 space, that was another creative challenge for all of us that are coaching and teaching online. And the Grand Allegro, I have to say, most of it was not, we just weren't able to cover it.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, you just kind of had to accept that we all have restrictions, just like, you know, when we, you know, the only social gatherings I do are in my backyard 6 feet apart. I don't get to hug all of my friends. We just have to accept that there are things we don't get right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the Grand Allegro, the one thing we have done is put tennis shoes on for the kids, so they can do a sisson, side to side, taking off from 2 feet. A lot of taking off from 2 feet to give that sense of movement is also helpful. And then you can jump them using the bar. You can have them.
That's true.
Supporting the bar. But now we're sort of trying to recondition them back into what it means to move expansively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, personally, I think the quick twitch response of Petite Allegro is one of the most important parts. Again, because of the coordination, there are so many coordinations involved with Petite Allegro. How, you know, the épaulement, it's, you know, and I think it's one of the most important aspects of the technique to really, it's like a culmination of technique, if you will, in our technique, I think. And I always bring to mind when I heard you say not leaving the floor and the tempo, I thought immediately of David Howard, and I thought, oh man, they were hard.
Yes, they were.
They were a challenge, but they were great because it was an immediate reversal, and I kept that as a teacher. And I thought that immediate reversal is so important, also to challenge the brain, you know. So beautiful, thank you, because I've been wondering about that. The tennis shoes it's a great idea. Great idea. I want to go back now to your celebrated 16-year career with New York City Ballet. And just a little side note, we met for the first time in 1987 when I was auditioning for American Ballet Theater, and you and our dear friend Nina Chegaray are so close and went through the school together. And so it is just a side note that, you know, it's amazing how long we've actually been in each other's orbits. So you had this amazing career, and you were principal dancer for so many of those years, and you did, you know, so many of the seminal Balanchine works. You also originated work. You worked with choreographers, several, and many iconic, so you originated work with many iconic present day choreographers. Can you describe the aspects that caused you to reimagine yourself as an artist in both repertoire? So perhaps, you know, the iconic roles you went into, the Balanchine roles that existed. So with the repertoire and the original works. So that's the first part of the question. And then can you explain how your approach to rep versus your approach to being created on, how that differed, or how that, if it differed?
My first thought to your first question is top of mind, because you may have heard just about a week ago, one of my beloved coaches and teachers and mentored, Sally Leland, passed away. And just a few months before that, another one, Susie Hendel, passed away. So these two women were the two most influential voices in my career as a dancer. I worked with both of them throughout my entire time at New York City Ballet. And I really attribute both of them to giving me so much of who I am as a dancer and shaping me. And but what both of them gave me, and I'll tell you a story about Sally Leland. What they gave me was the freedom to be me and discover who I was. And I'll explain that in one of my first big roles that I was given was the lead in Balanchine's square dance. And it was something I did, I think I'd been in the company maybe a year or so. And I did it throughout my entire career. And I'll never, ever forget my very first rehearsal in the practice room at the then State Theater at Lincoln Center. Sally walks in and she said, "Okay, Margaret, it's just the two of us." She said, "All right, so before you, Kay Mazo did this role, Meryl Ashley did this role, Kira Nichols, iconic ballerinas." And she said, "And what we're going to do today is figure out how Margaret Tracey is going to do this role." So, to be a young corps de ballet dancer, being given this ballet, which is just came to be truly one of my favorite roles I ever danced. To be given that sort of invitation, it was an invitation to say, "Oh, wow, somebody wants me to be me." And so the beauty of so much of Balanchine's repertoire allows that, because, I wasn't asked to do theme the way, again, my predecessors did it. I was asked to, obviously I had to do the technique and try to measure up, but the essence of who I was given that complete and utter freedom within almost the entire Balanchine repertoire that I danced. And then Jerry Robbins, who I had the great fortune of not only dancing many of his iconic ballets, but also being a part of his choreographic process, which had a different sense of freedom. Jerry could be ruthless to work with, but the freedom in which he gave you was his insistence on you bringing your authentic self to that role, whether it was something he was choreographing on you or whether it was something like, I remember when he taught me Afternoon of the Faun. I never forget, I spent 3 weeks preparing it in a studio with him. From him, he taught me every moment, and every night he would say, "Okay, Margaret, I want you to go home and think about this. Think about what shampoo you're going to use tonight on your hair, and how it feels and smells when it starts to dry, and what do those point shoes feel like when you break them in? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What are you thinking in that moment?" Talk about being present. If you could not be present in the moment with Jerry, then you were acting. You weren't authentic. Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm not saying it was always easy with him, because he could be ruthless. We all know that, but it was only because he was so hard on himself. So I sort of, to answer your question from the dancing rep versus being choreographed on, again, Bill Forsythe, one of the first choreographers I worked with early in the early 90s. He came and created Herman Schmerman for us at New York City Ballet. Again, such a collaborative process where I guess I was incredibly fortunate, because from Peter Martins to Trey McIntyre to Bill to to Jerry even, I always felt like I could bring myself to that process. And so I didn't feel a major difference between rep and new works being choreographed. And I do think that's unique because of the Balanchine repertoire and the Robbins repertoire that was a staple of my diet.
Yeah, but also Jerry, you also had, I mean, Jerry was alive and creating. So you constantly had this was constant tandem, very much like, I mean, yes, the Balanchine rep, but Jerry was present. He was there. And it was like Bill was present and there. He was there was always creation happening, whether or not you were in the piece or not. That creative thing in the air was always present. No, so perhaps that was also it, that you really were in a company that a constancy of choreographic energy was there.
And there was an evolution, because, you know, working with a live choreographer, a present choreographer, they change. You know, the way you do it one year is not the way, oh, I think I want to change this. And that is such a gift.
Yeah.
And what I found as a dancer in the Balanchine repertoire, in all of the neoclassic and non-storyline roles that I was able to dance, is that the way I danced square dance in that first few years was not the way Peter Bowl and I danced it in my last season before I retired. We had evolved and grown artistically, and that's what is the brilliance of that base of choreography, is that it allows one, I mean, you don't get tired of it. It's brilliant work. And again, that invitation that Sally gave me, that first rehearsal, was who Margaret is at 19 is not who Margaret was at 35 when she retired. And I was invited to be that Margaret through that journey. And I recognize how unbelievably fortunate I was. So that's why it's an interesting question to me, because in my experience, the rep versus the new works was just, there wasn't much difference. I mean, there was some tangible, but less so for me personally.
Yeah, beautiful. You know, one of the last things I saw, because I was there on the last night, right when everything got canceled, the next day we came in, you know, and the program I was on was the one that was canceled. But before that, I saw Glass Pieces, and my God, is that an amazing piece?
Incredible.
I mean, it just keeps unfolding. You think that the idea might be done, and then it unfolds to the next level. It's an extraordinary piece.
Yeah.
Extraordinary what he did.
You know, and I was there for the premiere in the 80s. I remember seeing, or the very first performance of it. And in the 80s and 90s, we're like, oh, this is so dated. It's definitely not going to last. And here we are in 2020. You're absolutely right. And I was like, boy, was I wrong. Sorry, Terry, but it's brilliant. Yeah.
It's timeless. It holds up.
Yeah.
It holds up. I was sitting I had to go back many times because I couldn't get enough of it, because I was also trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, what is the pattern here? You know, and I love that. I love to be like, if I have a head scratcher, I'm coming back multiple times. And plus it's just a glorious piece of art. So let's see here. Teaching has always been important to you. I know that you started out in Colorado. I know you've spoken about that teaching as well, and you just spoke about your two coaches. So I know it's been important to you. And since retiring from the stage in 2002, you have become one of the country's most admired and dedicated teachers and art education advocates. Furthermore, you have fostered pre-professional exchange programs with the Royal Danish Ballet, the National Ballet School of Canada, the Palooka School in Dresden, and the Paris Opera School, as well as recently the the school has been recognized as a partner school for the prestigious, I got the word, Prix de Lausanne. And you shape, and I said this earlier, but you shape and build artists. And you just spoke about how that is one of the things that you revere, and that you speak about the humbling aspect of it, but you really do. You shape and build artists, Margaret. What is your philosophy on being an artist? So, you know, from yourself, because this is really how also this, absolutely, your past figures in. Your love figures into how you're shaping and building. So what is your philosophy on being an artist? We heard just very strongly one thing that meant something to you, that you got to be brought to the table. And what does it mean, and what does it take in your mind to be an artist? How can a dancer reach their dreams?
You know, and again, those are tough questions, because I feel like I'm just discovering how to provide space for young dancers to really figure that out. You know, I spent a lot of time as a teacher first, you know, how do I build technique in these dancers? And again, that's just I've been so strongly reminded recently of how that is so only one piece of who they are going to be. Because again, it's not about just who they are as a dancer, but who they are going to be as a human, because they're going to be a human a lot longer than they're going to be a dancer. So when I think of building a creative artist, I think there's a few ingredients that we have to make sure we are providing space for. And it really is about providing space. So much of it is you've got to make room for and encourage actually, because this is encourage and invite young dancers to be curious about themselves, whether it's in their technical development, their and then, because, you know, we sort of need that technical foundation to explore who we are artistically. And it's not that one happens, check, we do that, and then we move on to the next. It's constantly addressing both of those areas, because, you know, for any dancer, we're constantly refining and honing and working on our technique. But how do we become curious about the process of that? I think becoming curious about the process of that can start to lead, I've watched this in young dancers, can start to lead to the spark of imagination. Of what am I going to do now? What am I going to do with all this gorgeous technique that I've developed? It's just technique. Otherwise, it's boring. And so, what am I going to do with it? So you go from trying to develop a young dancer to be curious about their work, and then figure out how to invite them to discover and play with their own imagination, and then constantly reminding them that they've got to be present in the moment and be surprised by what can happen. My greatest development as an artist didn't come from me calculating, I think this is the day I'm going to make an artistic breakthrough. That's not how it works. You know, it's when I was just telling this story to my colleague Andrea Liang, who's just joined me here at the school. And I was telling her, I said, I was doing, you know, Firebird one night, and I was so excited I got to wear red shoes and red tights the only time, and I slipped and I fell because I thought I could fly. And then I fell, and then I thought, well, okay, so I fell. Let's get up and see what happens. And what the transcendence that happened in that performance is something I never could have planned. And that transcendence only happens as an artist. You're nodding because I know you've felt this both as a dancer, as a teacher, as a choreographer. It doesn't happen when you plan it. And it's not that you don't have the technique to back it up, the curiousness about it, the imagination, but when you show up in the moment and let that magical transcendence happen. And if we don't show up, it doesn't happen. So how do I do that as a teacher? I'm still trying to figure it out. My team and I, we constantly talk about it. And I think we have to talk about it. We have to try things that work, throw things out that don't, ask our students. I've gotten into a habit, and this is from my son. My son is a senior in college now. And I think this was when he was in high school. He was sharing me one day. He said, you know, Mom, I really like this teacher. And I said, well, why? Well, Mom, he asks us if what he just did actually worked. He asks for feedback in the moment. He'll do something, and it was his film studies teacher who he really revered. And interestingly enough, my daughter is now a senior in high school and has him as well. So he's a great teacher. And their perspective was, that he would try something new, and then he would say, so what do you think? Did it work? Did it land? And so I've started that practice over the years of asking my students. I think it's a great idea. I come in and there, sometimes it tanks, and sometimes they're like, you know, Miss Tracey, that really helped. Do it again. Do it again. Do more of that. So again, it's that dialogue. It's that constant two-way street.
Yeah. What you just—
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Because what you just spoke of is something I discovered over the years too, as a choreographer, you know, and as a teacher, because I started teaching in '99. So these things kind of grew together. But I have employed that, asking them, because as we know, words are so important, right? So I'll say very often, did how I explain that, did that, as you said, land for you? And you can see it in their eyes, and say, okay, we got to go about this a different way. So it is an amazing tool. It is like one of those magical keys, right? And I had an interesting conversation with a young dancer just recently about, he asked me, he said, I'm making a solo for him. And he asked me, he said, so, because it is also a gestural solo, there's an element of animation that's going to be in it. And so he has an invisible partner, but the partner, it is a duet, but that partner he's never going to see the partner. So there are big questions for a young dancer to tackle, right? That's hard for any dancer, to really partner and dance with someone or something that's not there. So he asked me the question, he said, so when do I really hone the ballet technique? You know, when do I really let that shine, and when do I let the other? And I said, okay, well, big learning moment, they're not separate. And it's what you just said. I think that's a big hurdle. And it is about the presence, is that your technique isn't something to plan and wrap up in a bow. That technique is so plastic. And what you learn about it on stage, in the moment, and how, what you said, if your foundation is known but not stuck, then you have the chance to ride that wave. And I explained it to him. I was like, so in your toolbox of technique, you're not going to, because we also spoke about marking, which I don't believe in. I don't believe in marking, because you're always learning. I said, just think, if you don't mark and you're learning a role, you've gone through the gambit, A through Z, of the things that can go wrong, the things that work. So when you're on stage and you make the plan, which we've all done, Margaret, and you're like, today, H and the letter P and Z, I'm going to work on those things on stage. Never comes. And what surprises you, letter A and letter Z have decided to say hi. And if you haven't practiced those aspects, you're going to be in trouble. So it's everything you've been talking about, that the preparation is the art. Right? Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I always say this, as arts educators, we're process driven. We aren't end product driven. Because
Yeah.
What even is the end product?
Yeah. I think it's death. I mean, that, because you're going to keep going. No, I mean.
Yeah. No, and so process is, you know, process is everything. Process is everything as a human. You know, the people that I admire, my own personal mentors, whether they're in this industry or not, are people who are always in a process of discovery. And, you know, it's the minute we stop that process of discovery that you said, yeah, then art doesn't happen. Then you just create a technique. Then you're a technician. That's when you lose what it means to be an artist.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. This was very interesting. I read through your studies in psychology and the ties to the community clinicians, you instituted a comprehensive wellness program at Boston Ballet School. Can you please expound on this important and vital program?
Well, one of the first things I did when I came here that I was very concerned about making sure is that we as a school, Boston Ballet School, would be thinking about our students as whole children, and not just thinking about our responsibility for the beautiful tendu. And a beautiful quote I heard, and I'm going to paraphrase it and butcher it a little bit, but Galen Stock, who is the former director of the Royal Ballet School, said, when I first became a director, I heard this quote, and as I said, I'm paraphrasing it, something about, it is not only our job to create dancers with beautiful technique, but also contributing citizens to the world and people that we'd want to know. And so I remember thinking that was part of my responsibility in my new role, was to, yes, I had to have a great syllabus and great curriculum and incredibly qualified teachers, but that we're educating whole children. And so really looking at how we are developing the health and wellness of our students. So that's always been a part of our curriculum. And what I am pleased to say is that, Boston Ballet School is not completely unique in that area. So many schools across the globe, because I have these conversations with my colleagues, that holistic approach to making sure we are training our students in the most healthy manner is something that I think a lot of us have embraced, from physical therapy, injury prevention, nutrition, curriculum, social and emotional well-being. How do we manage stress? How do we, all of that, to what I've learned this summer, which is, okay, one of the things I was missing in sort of that holistic approach is, how am I developing the student voice and listening to their voice? So again, I look at this part of my work as a continual process as we look at the landscape of our world, and then within that world, our industry, that bubble within the bubble, how that's changing, and how as an educator, if actually educators and dance schools need to be ahead of the curve, because we're the one producing the dancers that are going to be on the stage. So we often say we've got to be 2 steps ahead of what's happening, the changes that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've never thought of it that way. That is so true.
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And my colleagues and I, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, just extraordinary, Margaret. So we've come to the 3 questions that I ask all of the session participants. Can you share a favorite or impactful memory? Something that comes up now, because I know we have so many, the collection is vast, from your creative life.
Well, I mentioned one of being surprised on stage when I was doing Firebird, of falling and having that moment sort of remind me of my humanity, that allowed me to transcend into something that didn't. I remember coming off stage, I guess I can just elaborate on that moment, and coming off stage and realizing that I experienced something I'd never experienced before, could never have prepared for, no matter how much I would have planned it out in the studio. It was like I'd opened a part of myself up to being surprised. And I guess when I think of that example, I have so many moments with my students in the classroom. Come in with my class plan, because you have to plan. I come in with things that I want to accomplish. And if I show up, if I'm present, they help me discover something about them that they've never known. And when I see that, those moments, and they're tiny little moments that happen on a regular basis in the classroom that I think are some of the most creative, magical experiences that I get, that I am lucky enough to have in my life on a regular basis.
Yes. Wow. Yes. Yeah. Do you have a daily insight? No, sorry. Do you have an insight or daily inspiration that you can share about living a creative life?
Breathe.
Breathe. Yeah.
Just breathe. When I don't breathe, when I'm not, and breath goes beyond the oxygen that you're taking in, and it goes much beyond the physical act of breathing. It's the stopping to see, where is my heart rate in the breath? Where do my muscles feel in the breath? Where is my brain in the breath? Is it in Swirlsville? Is it going down some rabbit hole it doesn't need to? My breath centers me, and I've had to work really hard at grounding myself in my breath, and I've done this through various methods. Most recently, I've been working with a really skilled Alexander technique teacher, and I've shared her with my students, but that centering on the breath allows us again to be in the moment, so that we can be in the process of discovery more often than not.
Beautiful. Alexander technique, there was a wonderful teacher that came over to Frankfurt when I was dancing, changed my life about how I felt the spirals in my body. Because as you know, with Alexander, your eyes have to stay open to feel. You don't get to close your eyes to feel. And I think that's so important, right? Because we don't close our eyes when we dance. Well, sometimes when we improv, but it's a dangerous thing. You got to keep your eyes open. And I learned so much about the spiral and the presence of breath, and how, it's working like this within our body. And that how that breath is making that expand, because that's Alexander, right? The expansion and the length. That was mind-blowing to me, expansion. I've always thought about length. And when I incorporated the expanding of my back, I felt like my wingspan just grew exponentially.
Because when we connect with that breath, we fill up ourselves. And we fill up this, all of us walk around in this world with the ability to be completely expanded or contracted. And so, and I experiment a lot with that in my work with the students, is that, before we even start a plie, are you in your body? Have you filled every cell of your physicality in order to begin to move before you move? That's an intentionality of it. So that is a daily practice that I'm continually a student of. And again, I guess that's another one of my great mentors, Mavis Staines, who runs National Ballet School of Canada, has taught me that part of my job in my role is to constantly be the student, be interested in learning. So.
Yeah. Exactly. There's just, I've said it before in this program, but Bill used to say, I don't understand bored. How can you be bored? And it just keeps coming back, because I feel the same way. There's just so much. And it seems like, as we know now at this age, I feel like, I feel like the acceleration in me to keep learning, it's really accelerated. I feel more hungry. It's really amazing, which I'm like, hey, great.
That's a good thing.
And then the last question, in supporting and building a more equitable dance community, what are some specific daily practices we can be active with?
That's a wonderful question. I think our daily practices is really, again, we have to question. I think let's pare it down to our industry and the ballet industry, and very specifically to the assumptions of our traditions and always questioning why. Because I think the only way that we are going to truly embody authentic change, authentic cultural change, is when we can honestly look at those aspects of our tradition, whether it's a power structure, whether it's a, we've always did it this way, it always has to stay this way. We have to question that and ask why. And if the answer does not allow inclusivity of something beyond our own experience, then we still have more work to do. And I think we have a lot of work to do. It's the assumptions that have been ingrained in us, even down to, again, we were talking about this with my teachers the other day, that whole idea that we were sort of raised, just shut up and dance, there was some comfort in that for me as a young person, because I didn't like to talk. So I was I was comforted in that. I could just show up all day. I didn't have to talk. I could just dance. And yet I wished I'd been challenged even younger it took me a long time to find my voice. I'm grateful for that. Those that did encourage me, and I talked a little bit about that with you in this last conversation. But we have to make sure that we are making room for other people's experience in our industry, because that is what we have not done a very good job of.
No, and the bottom line is it'll make it richer.
Absolutely.
It's like how many times does it have to be proven that together we're better?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
we need the voices. We need equal representation. We need equal seats at the table. We need equal voices. We need the face of America in our ballet world now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I read a wonderful book by Jennifer Brown last year called How to Be an Inclusive Leader. And I'm, and our entire senior leadership at Boston Ballet has recently read it. One of my takeaways from that book was that I was challenged to expand my orb of diverse voices, really in my inner orb. I had some external voices, but really, that's what I've done. I've consciously gone and thought, I have got to expand and invite those voices into my own inner personal orb. This is just Margaret as a human, that will then influence when I am in my orb around my professional world, because there really isn't, if there's one thing I've learned, is that there isn't a difference between who we are as humans and who we bring to our art. And so it's been life-changing and life-enriching. And it's been humbling, and it's been difficult and messy. And I haven't always felt great about myself, but it also has been incredibly motivating, because I do believe that if we can't get it right as dancers, then this country is doomed. I think the arts can be incredible examples of how to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive communities. So no pressure for the arts world, but I'm taking on the pressure, because I think we need to.
I think we need to, and what you just explained doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like it sounds like you're ready, Margaret. And if we're ready, then the change can happen sooner than we all think.
Yeah.
So, wow, Margaret, you know, I was so looking forward to this conversation, and what a generous soul, inquisitive, inspiring woman that you are, from, you know, from your amazing career to this very large entity called the Boston Ballet School, and how you lead this place. You're an inspiration, and I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you. So I have a question.
Well, before you jump into that question, I just want to say, you know, back at you, woman. You have been a dear friend for years, and your generosity is something that I have always aspired to as well. So I consider our friendship among those that help keep me not only inspired and motivated, but honest and challenged in all the best ways. So this conversation I've just loved. Thank you, Helen, for inviting me.
Yes. So I want to direct people to find more out about you. So there is a small bio for, you know, in the description box that will come when this video is posted, that we know. But I have an address here, bostonballet.org/home/education. Is that correct? For your,
yes.
Great. Is there any other place so that they can find out more about what you're doing, or is that really the best place to go?
That's the best place to go, I think. Yeah.
Great. All right. So we have new guests every week, and our next session will feature Adam Sklute, the Artistic Director of Ballet West. Oh, and also I have to say hello to you from Edward Liang. He was our guest last Wednesday. So, and I said that you were the guest. He was like this, and he touched his heart. So he says hi. And now is the time for my thank yous. As ever, I thank our dance world first for holding us up for basically my entire life. So I'm ever thankful, and just ever thankful for the dance world. And I want to thank Gracie Spina, who is a big part in Creative Vitality Jam Sessions. So thank you, Gracie, and Margaret. And one more time, thank you so much for being here. And you are reimagining art. So more power, and let's keep going. I'll see you soon. I'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
All my love.